Hello. It's start of another week, start of another walk. It's a bit rainy today, just a little bit, not heavy, just a bit in the air. Just hope it doesn't get any worse. The sky's not that dark really, so, but yeah. I did my video yesterday, different location than this, but back to this regular one. I'm a Walkie Talkie. So I was thinking about the subject for this one, and as I've said before, I'm kind of scraping the barrel a bit at the moment, gaming news wise. It's not a huge amount going on really. I mean, I don't know how you pronounce it. Is it ROG Ally, ROG Ally? The thing that Microsoft is doing with the sort of portable handheld device. Don't know much about it. I know I'm not really interested in it, which is probably why I don't know a lot about it. I mean, I heard a lot of rumours going into it that it wouldn't play games from your Xbox library. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. Like I say, I don't know a lot about it. I haven't really looked into it. If that's the case, then that is just, frankly, one of the most ridiculous things ever. I mean, the issue you're going to have, though, is if you own physical media, you're not going to be able to play it on this device, because you can't play physical media on your Xbox without the disc being in the drive. So how are they going to do it wirelessly? Well, they're not, are they? I say wirelessly, I mean portably. They're not, are they? So I don't know how that's going to work, to be honest with you. I think it's going to present quite a problem for the device, for the usability. Because why would you have something that you can't use on the Xbox in terms of hang on, just negotiate all of this here, because it's quite slippy. Yeah, how are you gonna play your games, your Xbox games that are on disc from your library? Well, you're not. So straight away, if you're somebody who plays primarily physical media based stuff, you're either going to have to buy the stuff again or not bother. So you, again, owning physical media is punished, which seems a little bit unfair. But I don't really know what other options they could have with this device, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, if it doesn't play your Xbox library games, even the digital ones, again, that seems remarkably stupid and dim from Microsoft. The only thing that you're going to get with this device is this just another Steam Deck, a Microsoft branded Steam Deck. In which case, what's the point in branding it an Xbox? So I don't know. I'm a bit confused by it all. And that's probably, say, the only thing that really has happened I can think of, and I'm not particularly interested or bothered about getting one. So, as usual, I'll see you in the park. So yeah, back in the regular park. So yeah, as I was saying, I don't really know what this thing's for. And obviously I've not really looked into it too much, so I'm not qualified, but if it's like a Steam Deck, well, Steam Deck already exists. So why would I want another one? Why would I want this? If it's not a Steam Deck and it is just for Xbox games from your library, therefore just the digitally downloaded games, what's the point? Again, what about the physical media? If you've got a Series X and you bought stuff on disc, what's the point? It seems kind of pointless, doesn't it? And it's not an exclusive handheld in the same way that the Vita or PSP is, or was, or were, because there are there's no physical game port that I'm aware of, and Microsoft haven't made any announcements over it being based on a technology on a mini disc or the UMD or cartridge or SD card. Jesus Christ, it's slippy, or whatever. I definitely need better footwear for this time of the year. This is quite, these leaves are slippy. Gonna have to get some, either dig my Doc Martin boots out, or buy some hiking shoes, I think. But anyway, yeah, it kind of made me think, like, obviously I can't categorize this as pointless hardware because I genuinely don't know what it does. But it made me think about other hardware releases that were crazy. And again, I'm not calling this one crazy because I don't know. What I'm saying is that, yeah, I don't know what this does. What I'm saying is that I don't get it. But there have been some crazy hardware releases in the past. The one that always leaps to my mind, the worst that I know of, was the Commodore 64 GS. I've mentioned this before in a couple of videos I've done previously, but by God, that was the shittest thing known to mankind when it come out. It was the epitome of Commodore losing the plot back in the early 90s. So you had the Commodore 64, a legendary computer, hugely successful, brilliant piece of hardware, lived on for many, many years. It survived and flourished even when its successor, the Amiga, came out. The Amiga was massively more powerful. That was an awesome piece of hardware. But the C64, it carried on and flourished. throughout all of that, all of the Amiga's period. There was a very brief period towards the end where the Amiga surpassed the C64, primarily because of the fact that they stopped making the C64. But it was a very brief period. You know, even going into the 90s, the C64 was still selling well, still doing well. And that was 5 years after the Amiga launched. So, I mean, by the time the Amiga really started to do stuff, that was like 4 years old. You know, it was 4 years old. I'm just staying here for a minute because the rain's picked up a bit. There's Marvin the magpie. So yeah, that's how good the C64 was. And it's, you know, it's come back now. There was the C64 Mini, then there was the full-size C64. They basically re-released the computer, and now they're doing another one, the C64 Ultimate, which is a black one. That comes bundled with games that people have made in sort of more recent years. I'm imagining you can, if you've got the C64 Mini or the full-size C64, that they'll work on there too. You imagine you can buy them or download them and play them on there as well. I don't know. Maybe there's extra juice in the Ultimate C64 where you can't play the older stuff. But the point is, it's still going. You know, albeit, you know, as a more of a homebrew fan thing, but they're still making the hardware in different guises today. The C64 was that popular, they were actually going to make a C65, which, if memory serves me, was kind of a halfway house between the 64 and, yeah, it's kind of a halfway house between the 64 and the Amiga. And it was going to come, I think, with like a built-in 3.5-inch floppy. But it was going to be backwardly compatible with the C64 library. And yeah, that got abandoned, probably rightly so. I mean, why release a piece of hardware that wasn't as powerful as your flagship hardware at the time, which was the Amiga? Just lower the price of the Amiga, which they eventually did in and around that era. So yeah, they eventually did that. Commodore eventually, they released the Amiga 600, which I had, and that was the entry-level Amiga, which was basically a replacement of the Amiga 500 Plus, which was sort of their best sort of affordable home version of the Amiga. By the time I could afford one, they'd scrapped the 500 Plus, replaced it with the Amiga 600, which was actually not. This was around the time that Commodore was imploding by being run by insane people. Basically, the 500 Plus would play all the Amiga games. The Amiga 600 wouldn't. It'd play a lot of them, but there was also an awful lot that wouldn't work because it was a different chipset, and also it didn't have a numerical keypad, which some of your flight sim games on the Amiga used. You know, it was a bit, again, the initial concept for the 600 was actually supposed to be the Amiga 300, which was supposed to be a cheap entry-level Amiga to get Commodore 64 owners into the 16-bit generation, and the idea was that you could upgrade it bit by bit to become as powerful as an Amiga 500 Plus, which again, I don't even think that was a great idea. Why not just refine the 500 Plus, take a hit and sell it cheaper? That would have made more sense. You don't have to go back to the drawing board. You don't have to pay for new tooling for molds and new chipsets or whatever. The 500 Plus Amiga caned every 16-bit thing into the ground at the time. You know, when I played games on the Mega Drive and then played them on the Amiga version, 99 times out of 100, the Amiga version was better. Audio was out of this world on the 500. I mean, it's just incredible on the Amiga. The graphics invariably were better. It was just better hardware. It was an absolutely amazing piece of kit. Commodore didn't have a damn clue what to do with it to get it into people's homes to theoretically replace the Commodore 64. The answer was right in front of them. They just had to knock 100 quid off the price, you know, which in the late 80s is what they should have been doing. If you think about it, in the late 80s, it'd been out for 4 years. By that point, they should have been flexible enough to say, okay, we're going to drop this 100 quid, stop making the C64, so you're going to save money on that production and focus entirely on making the Amiga 500 Plus. Well, it was the Amiga 500, but the 500 Plus was sort of a more refined version. And if memory serves, I think the 500 Plus had more RAM in it. So, I mean, you could upgrade the RAM on the Amiga, but I think this came with it already built in. So that made sense, you know. You don't, and if you just stop making the C64, you save on that production. I think that the thing was the games were still selling. 8-bit was still selling. And I think they were kind of worried that if they stopped making the C64, they would lose that market share. People would stop making games for it, but sometimes you have to cut the umbilical. You know, they stopped making the VIC-20, they stopped making the Commodore 16, they stopped making the Plus 4. So, I mean, they brought the Commodore 16 out to replace the VIC-20 as an entry-level computer. Why? Why? I think that was in '84. Your C64 had been out a year. You want people to play on the C64. So why are you cannibalizing your own market? There was a lot of confusion back then, you know. I think they were just trying to get people onto their computer systems. Got Magus Pius there. Where's he gone? He's right behind this tree. Well, there he is. All right, dude. They were trying to get people into that space. But you know, a friend of mine had a Commodore 16 at the time, and I've got to be honest with you, I didn't really rate it over the VIC-20. It didn't really do anything the VIC-20 couldn't do, that I saw, game-wise. it was no great shakes. I mean, yeah, it probably was more powerful than the VIC-20, but I'm just, when I say I didn't see anything that the VIC-20 couldn't do, I mean that. I mean, from the games that I saw, I just didn't see anything that was like, ooh, that's amazing. I saw some really bad stuff, like I've seen Green Beret on the Commodore 16, and dear God, that was something. That looks like it was programmed over a heavy weekend of booze and kebabs. It didn't even look finished. It just looks thrown together. And I guess if that was the that was the standard for the Commodore 16, it's little wonder it never really took off. But again, why? You've got the Commodore 64. Just throw everything into getting that out. That's what people ultimately want. I had the VIC-20 the minute, I went round to my sister's, because she left home when I was like 7, because she's quite a bit older than me. And I saw the Commodore 64. It was like, yeah, I want one of them. I didn't want to play on the VIC-20 anymore. I love the VIC-20, but, and I did play on it until I got the Commodore 64, but that's what you end up wanting. But if you had a Commodore 64 back then, that was the flagship Commodore computer. You just put everything into that. It was also, and so that should have been the case with the Amiga. And once you're getting to 88, 89, the C64 has been out 7 years by then. That should have been mothballed completely. At that point, you've got to be going, yeah, we're getting the Amiga now. And then Commodore should have just thrown everything into manufacturing that and bringing that to the forefront, but they didn't. I can't really speak to other systems because I didn't have a Spectrum or an Amstrad, so I don't really know an awful lot about them. But yeah, they then God, I've been on a massive magical mystery tour with this one, haven't I? They then came out with the C64 GS to go back onto some semblance of track, and dear God, that was absolute garbage in a can. That thing, absolute garbage. As I've said before, it was dead. It was dead on arrival, because who in the right mind is buying basically a cartridge-driven Commodore computer minus the keyboard, minus the tape deck? Who's buying one of them when you can go out and buy a Master System or an NES that's superior to the C64 GS? And of course, the important thing for them systems, they worked. Those systems actually worked. C64 GS didn't. As I've said before, there were games that were coming out on that system that were broken. You couldn't play them because they required a keyboard input, and there was no keyboard with the C64 GS. There was no keyboard at all. It was pure joystick interface. So you would go, you'd buy the console, you'd get it home, and I think it came bundled with a very old C64 game, which was International Soccer on cartridge. that actually came out when the C64 was launched back in 82. I think it is either 82 or 83 this thing come out. And yeah, it didn't work because you had to press one of the F keys to start the game. And you couldn't play it, it wouldn't start. So the actual boxed in game that came with this bloody thing didn't work. An absolute shambles. So yeah, absolute legendarily crap idea. I mean, Commodore was on its backside by then, but dear God, the cost of making that thing, of designing it, you know, of tooling it for the chipset and the manufacturing of the plastic itself, it was broke. It's an absolute waste of space. But that was probably one of the big disasters in the final throes with Commodore. I guess this has ended up being a chat about Commodore, hasn't it? Rather than broken or pointless hardware releases. Because as I say, I can't really say that the ROG Ally is, because I don't know enough about it. It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me as a device. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. But the dear God, yeah, the Commodore, bloody hell. And you know, the really weird thing was, in spite of everything, they could have still saved themselves. They came out with the CD32 console, which was basically a Commodore Amiga as a CD-ROM based console, but was done right, because you could actually buy peripherals that would turn it into basically an Amiga 1200. So if you had an Amiga 1200, you could buy a CD-ROM add-on for it. But if you just wanted the console, games console, you could buy the CD32, which it made sense. They actually did something that made sense, and the CD32 was well received. It was actually a decent console. I came very close to getting one myself, but at the 11th hour I changed my mind. Basically, at that time when it come out, it didn't have a mass platform of games, and I didn't really have the money to buy the add-ons, you know, like the floppy disk drive unit and keyboard and whatever. You bought this module that basically had that stuff, and then you plugged that into the CD32. And you know, initially at this point I'm after the Saturn, which later became the PlayStation. So it became pointless wanting one. And it was a good job really too, because Commodore went bust. And because they couldn't pay the suppliers for the components for the CD32. So it went bye-byes. And that was that. And it was a great pity really, because it was potentially really good, but the mismanagement at Commodore by then had killed it. It killed the company. It was game over for them, which was sad. But that's what happens when you let lunatics run businesses. You take a well-established, legendary company and you run it into the ground. was the sad end. But apparently they're coming back now, and I don't see the point in it, to be honest with you. I think it's pointless. What's the sense? It's done. Let it go. Let it die with dignity. This feels like they're going to half-assed drag the corpse of Commodore back alive, kicking and screaming, like some Frankenstein creation, dragged back from the dead. And for what? For what at the end of the day? You know, it's over. Nobody's going to buy it. You know, you don't have a brand name that anyone in the modern day cares about. Like people my age do. But, you know, for what? What's its purpose now? It's dead. Leave it. You know, they keep bringing these old systems back in. You know, all they are really, they're emulators. That's all. You know, you get the 500 Mini. It's brilliant. I love it. I love mine. But it's an emulator. That's all it is. How do I know? Because it's an Amiga 500 that basically will play Amiga 1200 games. You know, Amiga, you know, which required an AGA chipset. I think it was the AGA chipset. Well, the 500 didn't have that. So what have you got? You got some nonsense. You got some bullshit. Let's just say it's just an emulator. It's not the real thing. So just leave it. So as I was saying, yeah, it's finished. The C64 Commodore as a name is done. It's just for retro people now. And let's be honest, it's a fad. It'll fade away. And all these people that have been, you know, that bought the Commodore brand, what they're going to do? Lock down everything now. So, you know, they're going to officially market hardware, officially Commodore branded hardware that you'll pay for through the nose. I mean, the only reason you're going to buy it is for the license. You're not buying it for any other reason, because you're never selling it in the quantities that it was sold in the past. So you're going to have the cost of manufacturing this device, and it's just going to be a minor thing, you know, a low-end market. Well, we've got that. We've already got that. We've got the C64 Mini, we'll have the C64 Ultimate, and there's a C64 full-sized emulator out there. Leave it at that. Yeah. What we dragging the dead back up for? Just leave it. Same with any ideas with the Spectrum. It had its day, and it's gone now. So, yeah, it was going to be about hardware in general, but became more about witnessing the demise of Commodore, really, which was sad in the day. And they're just going to try and bring it back from the dead for it to die again right now, which is insane to me. So anyway, starting to pick up with the weather a bit here now with the rain, so I'm going to call it, and I'll see you again for another one of these soon. Catch you all later.